Right, there we go. Good morning, everybody, and a warm welcome to the first Willsview Academy ODTalk for 2024. We're excited to have you all here, and we're excited to kick off this year with this big topic of leadership development. And does it work? Have we seen it work? How do we know whether it works? Um, Craig challenged me to take on this topic late last year for this month's ODTalk. And it made me go into some really interesting rabbit holes because as I started researching and really looking into what is it that other companies do and how is leadership development actually measured? What is it that we measure? A lot of interesting stuff came up for us. So in today's talk, we're going to, as normal, have lots of conversations. We'll start off with a bit of a check-in and a small group discussion. We'll then come back and I will share a very quick overview of my research with you in terms of how do we measure and what is it that the theory and the research and ChatGPT tells us that we should measure. Just 4 short slides, and then we'll see where that takes the conversation after that. So to kick off, I thought I'll tell you a story about a leadership development program that I was involved in 2018, 2019. And I don't want to use the organization's name, so I'm just going to say it's a big state-owned organization with a tiny little spin-off that started doing very specific work in their space and started making a lot of profit out of this work that they did. So it was established as its own PTY or whatever it is that they do in the state-owned enterprises. And it did really, really well. This started in the 70s, and as I think 4 or 5 people in the spin-off in the beginning, and by the time we worked with them, they were about 120 people. And they were doing well, and they were making a lot of profit, commercialized, and they I think still have a really good reputation globally for what they're doing. And we did 9 conversations in leadership with the Exco team and the Manco team, the first 2 levels or layers of leadership in the organization. And roundabout when we got to conversation 7 of the 9 conversations, conversation was 7 or 8. The large organization, and this is just me paraphrasing and my interpretation of what happened, wanted to take it over. They wanted to almost steal it back because the bigger one wasn't making any money. They were reliant on state funding, and this little thing making so much profit, they wanted to incorporate it back into the bigger organization. And it really happened in not a very nice way. When I told Craig the story last week, he said, "Yeah, it's like capture." They started accusing the leadership team of corruption. They put people on suspension. They had all sorts of backhanded ways to try and get in. And somehow this leadership team managed to stand strong and to win the battle and to continue, even though the manufacturing plant was closed down for a while and so on. And when I met back up with them, I think it was for the last conversation, for conversation 9. So there was about a 4 or 5 month gap after the previous conversation. When I saw them again, we started with the check-in was, how are you? Are you okay? What happened? Are you coping? You know, it wasn't the normal check-in question that we would have done for conversation 9. And the one delegate said to me, you know what? The only reason that we're here today and that the whole team is still here, every single person who started on this program 9 months or whatever ago, then I think by then it was about 12 months ago, we're still here. All of us are still here. And the reason we're here is this program. This program made us a stronger team. This program put us on the same page. This program aligned us on the vision. It got us excited about the vision. It got us thinking about how do we keep everybody else aligned and excited? How do we look after our people? And it gave us one voice, and it gave us one language. And most of all, it gave us agency. It gave us the guts to stand up against what was happening. And of course, I was so proud in that moment. I couldn't believe how amazing this feedback was, and how strong this team was, and that they attributed a lot of that strength and a lot of the survival, and the fact that they were still there and still a team and still a strong team, to this program. And yeah, looking at the research now, I can see there's some of the things that we should be measuring is in there, such as retention. But in that moment, it was more a emotional thing for me as the facilitator, just being so proud of them, and really having empathy with what they've gone through, and hearing that this program had the outcome. We didn't go into it. Nobody in the beginning, when we did the proposal and when we sold them the program, nobody said to us, we'd like for you to do a program with our leaders that builds more agency. Nobody said that. So it wasn't a specified outcome, but it was one of the outcomes of this program. Another, just a short story. We worked with one of the big banks last year, and we did our Leader Shift program with them. It was a youth program, but the youth were people who were at least advanced in 2 levels in the organization. So they were already on the 3rd level of employment, some of them even at managerial level. And it was for people at that level and above, but 35 years old or under. At the end of the Leader Shift program, the sponsor of the program said to us that there's been so many promotions. This group of 40 people that went through this program, that they're just advancing in their careers. Some of them have moved out of the specific department into other departments, but they're moving and they're being promoted. And the other thing that she's seen is that a lot of these people have stepped up. They would step up in meetings, they would speak up in meetings, they would put their hand up and ask their manager, can I present these outcomes in the meeting to the ExCo members, etc. And she was very proud of them, just having found their voices and found more confidence in themselves and in the promotion. So that was also a way for us. But what I'm also saying through this is that in both these programs, we didn't, before the time, have the conversation with the client to say, what is it specifically that we are measuring in this program? What would you like us to specifically change, so that we could afterwards go and do an assessment or a survey or take the measurement to say, wow, we've moved from point A to point D as we wanted to because of this program. And I think that's one of the things that we said at World 3 we want to get better at this year, is to really measure the impact of our programs. And I think that's one of the reasons why this specific ODTalk is looking at that. So we really are here to learn with you and from you, and hoping to have good conversations. So I'm going to put you into breakaway rooms for the start, and give you some time to have some conversations around, where have you seen leadership development programs work in South Africa, in the companies that you work. We don't want today to go the conversation to go in a political direction necessarily. So in organizations that you might have worked in your space, if you are a facilitator or a consultant, maybe it's a specific client that you've worked with, where have you seen it work, and what is it that made you think afterwards, or realize afterwards, or like my story, what made your chest swell with pride afterwards, in terms of what happened and what changed and what the feedback was that you got? I'm going to give you a minute or two just to think about that while I set up the breakaway groups. And I will let you know as soon as I open them. All right, there's about 4 people per room. So I'm going to allow just over 15 minutes so that everybody gets a turn to tell a story. We'll take a little bit of feedback when we come back, and then I'll just do the quick presentation of what the research says, and then we'll go back into some more conversations. So the rooms are opening. You should get the invitation on your screen now. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some good conversations. We're not going to take feedback from all the groups right now. We should have time at the end after the second conversation to take some more feedback. But we've got about 10 minutes. So I'd love to hear just 1 or 2 stories before we move into the research. Is there anybody that would like to put up their hand and tell us a story that they heard or a story that they shared in their small groups?
Isla, we had a wonderful group. I was very lucky with Christelle, Robin, and Skulk. And obviously, we've got a car manufacturer, a very, very large training and development institution in the business process outsourcing world, and a university. And so we're so rich. I think one of the things that stuck out for me was the idea of it works when it's a journey and not a course. So the sense of making sure that there's a integration with a longer range set of activities that are happening in the business. That seemed to land for everybody. I think Robin got us there. She was talking about she's working to integrate the leadership development work with communities of practice. We didn't get enough time to explore that. This Skulk's been delighted by the transition to willingness to lead, that moment of choice of willingness to lead, and that he feels then things are working. So that's a couple of things that stood out for me, and other than the delight of working with that great group.
Thanks,
Liesl, good morning. Happy to share.
Yes,
good day and good morning. So I was in the group with Adele and Lorraine. I think the 2 things that stood out quite strongly for me was one, how we've rolled out. We've shared the experiences in terms of how we've rolled out and how that showed up in the business performance and the improvement of the business. But I think the question was still, was it because of the leadership development? Were we specific upfront to say what those leadership capabilities are that we want to measure? And did the programs have a direct link in influencing it, or were there other factors? I think the other one that was quite key for me, and ladies, you're welcome to join in, is the impact. We're very quick to measure the steps and what needs to be done, but what has the impact been? And has there been an impact strategically on the people? And how is that seen and how is that lived? Those are the 2 key takeaways that I would put forward.
I agree with you, Dustin. We've got this big plan, but we don't always like say, and at the end, what are we going to do? How do we come back? Can you say just a little bit more about how you said you talked about how it was rolled out?
Yes, so most of the leadership development in our experiences have been from top down. So we start with the executive and then senior, and then we cascade it all the way down. So some of the experiences that were shared is that from a timing perspective, once the senior leadership had completed, there was a bit of a lag to the middle managers, and so I think it's more around. We all agree that cascading it top down will reap the biggest impact But the question is that the right approach? Maybe a multi-pronged approach or a multi-level approach. I don't know. We haven't explored it, but yeah, we had all pretty much experienced cascading it from top down.
Right. Thank you very much. It sounds like my neighbors are cutting down a tree. I hope the noise isn't coming through too much. Can you hear that?
No, we can't
No,
hear it.
no, we don't
Great.
hear it.
I'm really glad because it sounds like they're in my garden. Okay, one more story. One more.
So, Liesl,
Yes,
Louise,
Louise.
can you hear me? I'm on the in the
Yes.
car, so I don't want to be a distraction. Please let me know if there's a problem.
Yes.
I was really excited about this call. So I've been, as you know, I've been kind of going, when's it happening? I want to be there.
Yeah.
I personally benefited enormously from being part of rolling out a leadership program over 13 years, because you learn a lot from doing the same thing over and over and over again with different groups of people and different contexts, etc. The big learning for me from doing Partners Possibility or being involved in Partners Possibility has been the reality, because I used to think in 2010, before we started this, I used to have a story around, well, you can't really track the impact and you have to allow people to achieve the outcomes that they want to achieve. And it is just about creating a space for people to learn. I don't think that way anymore. I don't think it's fair on anybody. So I now think it's really important to contract upfront before you do any leadership development program. What are the shifts that we want to see on 3 levels? And I think those levels are, what are the shifts that we want to see on the individual leaders and how they operate? What are the shifts that we want to see in the relationship? So if we go back to Daniel Kim's core theory of success, the quality of everything we do depends on the quality of the thinking we do first, but that depends on the quality of the relationships. So we really, I know I'm involved in a massive big project at the moment where the work that needs to be done, and that's the 3rd level of impact we'll talk about in a minute, is agile implementation. But what they're discovering increasingly is that they can't implement agile because the relationships are not strong enough for them to have the difficult and challenging conversations that they need to have and to kind of be on this journey of ambiguity and complexity. If we're going to deal with ambiguity and complexity, we need to start with investing in the relationship. And so then the 3rd level of impact is, and what is happening in the work? You know, am I a better production manager because I've been on this program? Are we able to deliver our projects? Are we able to increase the agility of the organization? Have we improved our results as a result of this leadership development program? So my challenge to all of us is to think about the impact of the program on 3 levels and to track all 3 of those levels. And you track them differently, so which we can talk about later if we want to. So I won't hog any more of the airtime, but would love to hear from others about those 3 levels.
All right. Thank you. And that's interesting. Yeah, and like you said, level 3, you can only really track if level 2, if the relationship things happen. I guess that plays back to level 1 as well. Right. Thank you, Louise. Thanks for sharing. I'm quickly going to just share the theory and the research in about 7 minutes or so, and then we can go back to having some more conversations. And we're not going to get into too much detail about how do we measure. I want to kind of just broadly, I've summarized a lot of stuff into 4 slides, is more about how do we measure and what do we measure. So first of all, I think everybody on this call is familiar with the Kirkpatrick model. He first published it in 1959, updated it a few times, and in 2016, the New World Kirkpatrick model was published by his son James and his son's wife Wendy, where they say we measure any type of training on 4 levels. The first level is how do you feel about it? Was the training valuable for you? So this is something you can do at the end of the day or at the end of the program. It's a little survey or a feedback form that you can fill in. Usually what we all know is included in there is, did you like the venue? How was the food? But also, how did they react to the training and so on? Second level is learning. And interesting here, it is not testing the learning. It is, do the delegates think that they'll be able to do things differently? Are they confident to do things differently? And are they motivated to do things differently? It's not, is it happening yet? Has there been any changes? Then it moves to the behavior level. So do they actually apply the training? And here what was interesting in the articles that I read, there was always this remember, behavior can only change if there are drivers for behavior change in the organization. So the conditions need to be favorable, such as processes, the culture, etc. And this we measure through things like observation, interviews, and so on. And then they say that level 4 is measuring the results. So here we would have had to identify the outcomes, like Louise said, contract that up front, benefits and results. And here we start talking about the return on investment by measuring the metrics identified. Now, obviously, with this model, there are some drawbacks. In most of the articles, there was a bit of watch out for the rise of personalized user-directed learning, things like the 70-20-10 model, etc., and that formal training is becoming less prominent, so that the Kirkpatrick model is not necessarily always suited to how we measure. And then we will have to always be aware of the context of the organization. What's happening in the organization? What other things are playing into the outcomes? We might have gone through a leadership development program, but we might also at the same time have a new system that helps people do their work better, or there might be a new CEO, and this could impact things like employee retention, on better production, etc., etc. So obviously for us to be able to measure, so here we're not talking about what we're measuring, we're talking about the ability to measure. Certain things have to happen before the time. And just broadly, these three are aligning the program objectives with organizational goals or the organizational strategy. In some of the articles, they talk about aligning the leadership strategy to organizational strategy so that we can draw those connections. We need to identify specific, measurable, and relevant outcomes and KPIs that can be used to gauge the success. So here, again, before the program, we have to decide what is it that we want to measure. What do they look like? What are those metrics? Are we updating KPIs? Are we looking for specific things like a 10% improvement in the speed of production or revenue, or a 20% reduction in employee turnover, whatever that is? And then before the program begins, there needs to be baseline measurement in order for us to measure. So I've worked with a few organizations where they say, oh, our turnover is very high and we'd like that to reduce. But do we have good metrics and good information, for example, on what the turnover is at the moment and what the employee turnover is costing us? Then just a few studies that was done and published in an article or article by CCL. Studies by Burson, Deloitte, Conference Board, and the CCL, the Center for Creative Leadership. They identified 4 areas that are where successful initiatives are yielded from leadership development programs. They're quite broad. So they're saying better bottom line financial performance. And of course, here again, we need to decide before the time what it is that we want to measure. And they say this happens because leadership development builds capacity for those executives or the leaders that work there or the managers to reduce costs, to drive new lines of revenue, and to improve customer satisfaction. The second one, they say, is the ability to attract, develop, and retain talent. And this happens because the development program boosts employee engagement. It increases the ability to close the gaps in the talent pipeline, and it reduces employee turnover. The third one, they say, is improved strategy execution, and this happens because employees or delegates are equipped with the skills to implement the strategy. And the fourth one, they say, is increased success in navigating change. So the ability is built to navigate and lead effectively in dynamic and evolving environments. I have to say this increase in navigating change, more adaptable, more flexible, better able to handle complexity comes up everywhere over the last few years. So in all of the newer research and newer studies done and newer articles published, this navigating change has become a very, very important leadership capability. And then just lastly, through all of the research that I've done, and I've asked ChatGPT various questions and structured my questions in various different ways, read a bunch of articles and looked at quite a lot of research. I've attempted to put the metrics, the things that we should be or could be measuring because of leadership development programs into 5 buckets or 5 clusters. The first one is the more qualitative one of are our employees more engaged? The more modern language is the employee experience, where we measure more than just engagement. So here we look at changes in employees' perceptions, and in these types of surveys, questions are asked around leadership effectiveness, about is my manager supporting me, things like that, and the culture of the organization. Then the second cluster or bucket is performance. So here we're talking about productivity, it's reduction in costs, it's uptake and revenue, the success rates of projects, customer satisfaction, measuring KPIs, strategy execution, and so on. Then there's a lot about retention, and in retention we also include attraction. Do people want to come and work here? What is the employer brand? Do we develop our people? Is there a reduction in turnover of employees, and so forth? Then the promotion rate, so the people that have gone on leadership development programs, are they progressing in their career? And even if they are not necessarily being promoted, are they taking on increased responsibilities in their roles? Are their roles changing? And are we building bench strength? Do we build a capacity to have people that are ready for promotions, maybe identifying high potentials and so on? And then there's the cluster of leadership behavior, and often it's talked about also as leadership competencies, which I think has a large interlink there. And here we talk about things like adaptability, communication, agency. Do I have a voice? What's the decision making like? Strategic thinking, team collaboration, and things like that. Now, in all of these clusters, there is overlap. For example, if we talk about employee development and reduced turnover, that is something that we might measure through an employee experience survey, and we might get some of the answers there. The leadership behavior competencies bucket, a lot of that might sit in the KPIs or the performance bucket. So there's a lot of interlinking. So none of these clusters are necessarily exclusive of each other, and I think they are all in a way definitely interlinked. All right, so we're going to put you back into your breakaways to keep on discussing, to keep going with your first conversation. And I'd like to just bring in the question, what you've just shared, how much of what I've just shared has come up in your conversation. Like Louise said, the you know, we think now you can't track it, but if everybody is happier and doing better and feeling better afterwards, but we can track it. So how much in your first conversation that you talked about, how much of that came up in what just happened, and did anything new come up for you now? Looking at what research said we should be tracking and measuring, and how we should be doing that. I think what Dustin also said, you know, the measurement isn't always part of our plan at the end. Okay. All right, so I'm going to open up the breakaway rooms again, and where are we for time? Oh, perfect. And this time you're going to have 15 minutes to have a conversation, just over 15 minutes, and then we will bring you back, and then we've got about 20 minutes left to get some proper feedback from the different rooms. The breakout rooms are going to open. All right, welcome back, everybody. We've got some time for some feedback from the group, so I'm going to ask each group to just give us a little bit of a summary of what they heard, what was interesting, what have you learned from each other, what would you like to share with the rest of us. Room 1 had Jenny, Louise, Richard, and Tabu. Louise, you were in and out.
Yeah, sorry, but they had a really good conversation.
Okay. Anybody else in the room wants to give us some feedback on what you were chatting about?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Thanks, Tabu.
Yeah, we had a good chat around you know, the whole issue of measuring the impact of leadership, and we spoke at length about the lived experiences of employees. So if we don't honestly measure and truly measure the lived experiences of employees and have open and honest conversations about it, it becomes difficult to honestly talk about the impact of leadership development, or the impact that leaders who have attended leadership development programs are having on the environment, on the teams that they work with, on the employees that they lead. So psychological safety becomes important. We've had a quick conversation around whether a lot of organizations are progressing from leading and managing with fear towards creating an environment where employees can receive and give feedback without judgment and without the fear that there will be repercussions at the end of the day. So whilst we acknowledge that there's a whole lot of things that needs to be measured, we truly believe that at the end of the day, it boils down to how the employees are experiencing the leaders in the organization, and that will tell us where the impact of leadership development and the impact that leaders are having in the organization is sitting at. I will pause here and allow the other colleagues to weigh in.
Anyone
Thank
else?
you, Tabo. Hi, thanks, Liesel. Yeah, that became quite a nice kind of topic where we went into the psychological safety, and I think Tabo has kind of articulated it and expressed it very well. Is certainly from experience in seeing in organizations there is a shift to be open to creating that psychological safety and actually looking at what are the recommendations of managers with the employees, how do they create more of that? But often what we are hearing on the ground level from the employees, even with managers that have gone on these culture and also in the leadership for change type of programs, that they're not walking the talk, they're not leading by example. they speak a good game, you know, but they're not actually feeling that, they're not actually seeing it being experienced on the ground by the employees. And that's sometimes a little bit of, you know, a highlight there, just a flag, a red flag, that maybe what we are seeing is that they, you know, they come through the program, they do very well through that, get very good feedback post and pre, you know, can see the value, etc., through evaluation. But it's through then the continuity. How do you create that sustainability once you've been in and walk away? How do you continue to create that momentum and maintain that within an organization? And so we're coaching, what we've seen is that, you know, that coaching conversations, helping managers to have those courageous conversations becomes quite critical. And it seems to be and has to be an ongoing thing to ensure the sustainability in an organization. Thank you.
Jane. Thanks very much. All right, let's move to. Sorry, Richard. Yeah.
To that, Louise was in and out, but right at the end she came back and made quite a pertinent point, in my opinion. And that is in a lot of the training that they've done is Louise herself used to give the feedback to the
Richard,
leaders.
shall I share what I said?
Please go ahead. You're going to state it much better than I.
No, I just want to. Anyway, so I said I used to take responsibility to give the feedback to the senior executives. So I became almost like a conduit for, you know, people would complain about the CEO, whatever. Then I would go and spend some time with the CEO, and then I don't want to do that anymore. I now realize that my job is to equip them with the skills to have those conversations with each other. So when the Exco member comes and complains to me about the CEO, I say, okay, let's kind of get ready to have that conversation with the CEO. And what will it take for you to get the courage? Oh, I'm so afraid. Okay, well, I'll support you. Why don't we arrange a three-way conversation? But your job is to learn how to give that feedback to the CEO. And it's had a massive impact. And I think sometimes because it's kind of, you know, it's like we valuable, we that conduit, but it's not really useful for the organization. What the organization need is people being able to have the tough conversations with each other.
Yep. Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Louise, and thanks, Richard, for bringing that up. I think we kind of fall into that trap easily. Anyway, room 2. Almin, you were in and out. Lawrence and Shirley.
Yes, so we did have folks dropping in and out of our call a little bit. So maybe I'll try and summarize what we were saying. I think we were in the same place of the lived experience of the participants as well as the employees, you know, in terms of tracking the impact. But it gets back to what we were saying earlier is if you're sending people out to do a program and then bringing them back into the organization and expecting them to make the big impact, that's where things seem to start falling apart. But if you're embedding the intervention within the organization and nurturing those conversations within the organization, and I love what you said, Louise, is that right from the word go, you're teaching them to have those conversations with each other, you know, with the CEO in the room, hopefully to start, and then, you know, working through the organization. That seems to have the best long-term impact, rather than piecemeal sending sending individuals out for training or development and then bringing them back and hoping that they will be able to shift the needle on the dashboard. So I think hopefully, and we talked a lot about psychological safety as well. Maybe we didn't use those words, but we were talking a lot about the dangers of toxic organizations where managing by fear is still happening, and then expecting talented individuals who are sent out for leadership development programs and brought back into that toxic environment and expecting miracles from them in terms of being able to make big changes. It's unfair. Whereas if the organization's willing to spend the money, then do it in-house and let's get those conversations happening in-house as quickly as possible, and not waiting for brave individuals to come back and trying to spread the word at that point. So I think hopefully that sums up our conversation. I don't know if you want to add anything, team, to that.
Clarence, Amin? No?
No, I think it's well summarized. Thank you, Shirley.
Okay, thank you, Shirley.
All right, thanks, guys. Room 3, Christelle, Craig, Robin, and Skulk.
I'll quickly give some input and then the team can add. I think we've realized that the last part of measuring and the most difficult part was the behavioral measuring and the impact that it made. Robin then made the good suggestion of a 360 evaluation, and to improve, to get that input from all the role players and within the organization. But it also depends on the maturity level of the organization or the individuals within the organization. And then the last part of the conversation, we also discussed the interrelationship between management and leadership, and that the two for me goes hand in hand, because every leader at some point will have to manage in his day-to-day doing. So yeah, so team can add there.
Thanks, Christelle.
Jacques?
Craig, Robin, Skulk, anything you want to add? Craig?
Oh, there was also for me an undercurrent of, is any leadership development wasted? So the question was, if you hadn't set out any of those outcomes in the 5 buckets, but you still executed a good leadership development program, is it wasted? And we were dancing between the sort of general benefits of leadership development, which I think your own research, Liesl, shows that good leadership development will have a positive impact across those 5 areas and more, and that they're interrelated. So yes, in certain contexts, I think we agreed that leadership development is frustrating and negative, because if you come into a deeply toxic environment, for example, as Shirley said, actually the leadership development program would have a negative outcome because you'd feel like it was a waste. But outside of those extreme conditions, we thought you could pick 1 or 2 measures depending on your context. So in a highly production environment like BWs, you'd pick probably some fairly hard metrics. And in the academic environment that Skulk's in, maybe some softer goals. Make it about that and enjoy the general benefit. That's kind of where we got to.
Right, thank you. Robin or Skulk, anything you want to add, or are you happy for us to continue?
No, I'm happy. It's fine.
Happy as well.
Cool, thank you. All right, room 4, Anita, Mbali, Runel. What did you guys talk about?
Lots.
Lots.
My bandwidth is really up and down, so I'm going to just stay with camera for a moment. I think what we looked at, first of all, so the other ladies can add, is based on your research results, it reinforced our first conversation, what we spoke about, around some of the measures and stuff to look at. Anita also spoke quite a bit around the motives, and I call it why an organization would go on a leadership development program. And we use some examples of what we experience in certain organizations. And maybe linking to what Craig now said as well, do you want 20 things to measure, or is there quite specific ones? And we stayed on the theme of the contracting components, the outcomes as the important conversation, but also I think to let happen what needs to happen. That often, if the shift happens at an individual level, the other outcomes then can benefit from it. Building new relationships and taking it back to work, but also understanding all these other unintended or unexpected outcomes. People moving around, what keeps that organization's leadership on track with their original intent. Bali, Anita.
No, I think
I
you
love what.
quite well.
Thanks, Anita. I love what you said. Also, let happen
Yes,
what
you've
needs to
said very
happen.
well, Robin. We also dipped in a bit on what Craig mentioned earlier on, that at the end of the day, there will be benefits, and Anita called them collateral benefits.
Collateral benefits. I love it.
Thank you, Renelle.
All right, thanks, guys. Sorry, I'm very aware that we have about 1 minute left, but I want to give room 5 some time to share. Dustin and Lorraine, we've lost somebody there.
Lorraine, would you like to go through? I'm still experiencing some load shedding challenges.
Okay.
You are able to hear me clearly?
Yes, you are. Thanks, Dustin. I think in summary, what resonated for us was really the that your findings, Liesel, kind of confirmed what we'd said in the first session. Really kind of highlighting that in that Kirkpatrick model, I think what we do quite well are the levels 1 and 2 in terms of reaction and learning, but levels 3 and 4 around the behavior and the results, really feel like those are probably areas or missing puzzle pieces for us. So that kind of resonated. And then tied in with what Louise was saying around those 3 levels of measurement. So measuring at an individual level, at the relationship and team level, and then at work and execution level. So those really kind of stood out for us. And then the other key takeout was that it is leadership development is a journey, and I think all too often OD and learning teams are too quick to change the program. So we find that every second or third year the leadership development programs are being changed, and perhaps we're not allowing ourselves or the business the privilege of enjoying the benefits of the leadership development programs, and maybe they just need to be embedded for a longer time so that we can actually more effectively measure and enjoy the benefits of the programs that we're putting in place. So those were probably some of the key takeouts that we had from our conversation.
And almost what you said, it's almost like it's a tick box exercise. Let's do something every 2 to 3 years instead of actually, like you said, embed it and allow it to be a journey.
and often aligned with new people coming into the roles. So kind of with they're coming in, and so new brooms kind of come in with a new idea and then just updating a program. It's
Absolutely. Great, thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. We've run out of time, so I'm not going to try and summarize what I've heard. But I think this was a great conversation. It has confirmed a lot of things for me that I found in my research and my quest to prepare for today. And I think I learned a lot. I hope you did too. And I've got a few ideas for upcoming leadership programs on how to do it differently and how to maybe think about it differently and even approach the champions of the program in a different way, and properly contract before the time. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for giving your valuable time to us. Thank you for participating and having conversations with us. And we hope to see you back here in February for our next ODTalk. Thanks, everyone.